On today's Comfort Kills episode, our guest spent her entire childhood and adolescence battling weight gain and ultimately bulimia and depression. As an adult, she later found several tools to help her manage weight, including gastric bypass surgery, years of antidepressants, and counseling. In 2017, however, her mother finished a 5-year fight with breast cancer, and she finally sat down and truly walked through all the pain and anxiety, and emerged 18 months later as if from a crucible with a new life philosophy: intentional optimism. Welcome, Andrea. Hi, welcome to Comfort Kills.
Hey, Dr. Jazz. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to have you here today. But can I say that when I was working on your intro, I couldn't help but smile the entire time. Your smile is so infectious. And I'm just
Thank
sitting
you.
here minding my own business, and I've got my headphones on working on the intro, and my husband's like, "What are you cheesing about over there?" And I was like, "Come here, look at this. You just have to see her smile. It's so infectious."
Oh,
So,
thank you.
yeah, so thank you. Hopefully,
Odd fact, I was senior superlative, best smile.
oh, wow.
So, yeah.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are?
Well, again, my name is Andrea Johnson, and your intro was, I thought, wow, who is she talking about? Is that me? So I'm a coach. I'm a leadership and women's empowerment coach,
Mhm,
and I am the intentional optimist. I call myself a professional encourager.
mhm.
And, a lot of that comes from the idea that we are constantly told no, we're constantly told what our limitations are.
Yep.
And like you explained in the intro, once I decided to say, nope, I'm not going that direction, I realized how many other people really need to hear what I have to say and what I needed to hear. And, they say, be the woman you needed as a teenager or a young
Right.
woman. So that's what I'm working on.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing your story, and just kind of let's start from the very beginning. Let's start
Okay.
with what it was like growing up, with the different difficulties that you had. Why don't you share with us just some of the struggles that you did have?
We think that our lives are just what we lived.
Mhm.
And it's not until you start sharing them that you realize the power that they have to, number one, heal, and the idea that our stories could be either inspirational or helpful to somebody else. And I look back now and I say, I was blessed to be raised overseas. My parents were missionaries in Korea, and this was back in the 70s and 80s, and it wasn't the amazing technologically advanced country that it is now, but there
Mhm.
was a beautiful expatriate community, and I went to school with kids from 65 different countries.
Yeah.
um,
Oh,
but
wow.
yeah, because it was an international baccalaureate school,
Yeah.
and it's celebrated. I think it's 165 years old. It's really
Wow.
amazing.
Nice.
And I still keep in touch with that community because we were overseas. We weren't around our extended family. So all those people were my aunts and uncles. So I had a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
But I did not have the tools to understand what it meant to not fit in and to deal with the idea that it's okay to be different. I think
Mhm.
in our hearts, we all want to be accepted and we all want to be like everybody else. And genetically, I was chunky as a kid. And, when you're in a more elite society, and the Korean society, they ate really, really healthy, right? I mean,
Mhm.
so Asian food is known for being really healthy. And so being overweight was not something that was normal in that society. So
Mhm.
even in the expat society, I was the chunky kid. And so it was just always the theme of my life was don't eat that, don't eat that, don't eat that.
Oh,
Yeah. So, it just, you get to the place where when you don't understand why you don't fit in and when you don't understand how to make things work, you figure out your own coping skills.
right.
And mine happened to be soothing myself with food.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but it wasn't a bad childhood, right? And that was, I think, part of the struggle in when you mentioned that I did go into a 12-week program for bulimia and depression. And one of the things I had to learn there was, it's not that I had a bad childhood. It's not that anybody did anything wrong. I was in the hospital with people who had experienced some really difficult things,
Yep.
but I didn't have the tools to handle even what I went through. And being uprooted from Wyoming at the time to Seoul, Korea, it's big for a 7-8-year-old.
Yeah.
And, you know, so you just don't, you don't realize some of the things that you've been through sometimes. So, anyway, those were some of the struggles I had growing up, and that's where I landed.
Oh wow. Oh wow. So let's discuss that a little bit. So being uprooted at the age of 7 or 8, you said, from Wyoming to Seoul, Korea. What was the culture shift like for you at that age? So I'm a military wife, and I'm a former veteran. My kids are military.
Oh, thank you for your service.
It's my pleasure. But my kids, they're military brats. So we've like uprooted them over time and time and time again. And so, but their resiliency is still stateside. I can only imagine what it's like going from an American culture to a completely different culture that you've not prepared yourself for, I'm sure, well enough at 7 or 8 years old. So what was the culture shift? What was it like? Can you think back that far?
Oh, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, there wasn't a lot of thought that went into making sure that the kids had resiliency. There just wasn't. It was because it was a spiritual environment. It was, if God calls us to do something, our kids will be okay. And there's a certain amount of that is faith oriented. There's a certain amount of that is true, but there's plenty of us that are examples of it actually not being the case. And I will say now there are fantastic programs before, like my sister even does this. She actually works with kids who are missionary kids who are going overseas. The work that they do now with these kids for cross-cultural understanding and what it means. I get cold chills. I walked through the facility, and I literally cried in every room. And she said, "Are you going to cry in every room?" I said, "Yes, I wish they had done this for me." Right. So I'm so thrilled that even though it was hard for people like me, they do that better now. But we did a lot of stuff with the military, and some of my friends were military kids, or, you know, we were missionary kids. They were Army, Air Force brats, but we call it third culture because you're not American and you're not Korean. You're this something in between. And so the term that we use for that is third culture kids, which is actually, they don't call us missionary kids anymore. They call us third culture kids. Because it's our own culture. And even when I came back for college, that's when things really kind of accelerated I always had these trouble coping. I hid food under my bed. I did all kinds of stuff. But it wasn't until I was on my own, literally in Houston, I had nobody, that things really accelerated. And I just did not fit in anywhere. I wasn't American. I didn't understand the way things worked. And even though I'd been taught, you're an American, you're always going to go back. It just, words don't mean a lot in that kind of a situation. Right.
Yeah. Wow. So that's third, what is it you called it? Third culture?
Third culture, because you're American, but you're living in Korea. So you're the third culture because you're neither one of those.
Yeah. And what's fascinating about that is I really think that there's some, not sure how to explain this. Like, so I was raised in DC, and then my husband was raised in the Southwest, and then our kids come together and we birth them in North Carolina. And it's like, but you get a piece of both worlds still, you know, like even though it's American culture, it's still very different. You know, DC is very diverse, very, big city life kind of idea. And then the Southwest is a little bit slower. It's a little bit different. Culturally, it's different. Food's different even, we're bringing them together. And then I remember one time my daughter in elementary school was asked, one of her projects was just, where am I from? And then she wrote, we were living in North Carolina at the time. And she wrote, I am from Maryland, which is, like we were from the DC area, but like technically I lived in Maryland. And I was just like, yes. It's just for some silly reason, it was just a proud mama moment that she claimed my state and not my husband's. Not that it mattered either way, but it's just, I just think that our kids come from a very different world too. And this third culture really kind of ties it all together. And like, I'm starting to see, okay, I get what you're saying, American versus Korean culture. And then you have, in their case, like just parents from very different walks of life too. So, wow, thank you. Learned something new today. So you'd mentioned the 12-week program that you went into,
Mhm.
and then in the bio, which I stole from your social medias, was the passing of your mother, and the moment
Mm.
when you realize that you have to sit down, you really have to start thinking about, you needed more time to yourself to figure things out. What was that moment like for you when you finally realized it's time for me to focus on myself?
Um, my mother battled breast cancer for
Mm.
12 years. And before that, it was lupus.
Oh, wow.
And, but if you actually went on my website, then you probably read my story about my mother,
Mhm.
who was this amazingly strong woman. But in a culture where it's not okay to be a really strong woman.
Mhm.
And part of that is just America. Some of that, back in the 70s and the 80s,
Yeah.
some of it was the evangelical culture, some of it is the Southern culture.
Mhm.
And she figured out ways to be unconventional and to be, she went on stealth mode a little bit and learned how to lead in certain areas.
Mhm.
But when I watched her suffer, it was, of course, it's very difficult when you watch someone you love suffer. But when she and I was always the black sheep. I was very different. If you talk personality types, Myers Briggs or whatever, I was
Mhm.
the odd person out. I mean, I literally have black sheep pictures in my walls. And, but the one thing that she and I always connected on was what we call our sanguineness. It's our
Mhm.
sunny optimism, our sunniness. And,
Yeah.
she always said to me, Andrea, you need to fly. It's time to fly. Be you.
Mhm.
And I never was comfortable being me because of all the things I had been through and my desire for acceptance and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And we sat down a couple of times. I mean, I'm in the Charlottesville area. She's in Richmond. So, and we lived in DC, not in DC. We lived in Baltimore for 12 years. So
Okay.
I'm very familiar with
Yeah.
everything you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I would drive over and spend towards the end in hospice. I would spend the night so that my dad could get some rest. And
Mhm. Mhm.
um, especially one Sunday, she sat knee to knee with me and she just said, "It is time. You need to fly. You need to be you." I said I wasn't going to cry on camera. But when when you realize you haven't been authentic, when you realize you haven't been yourself and you've been trying to fit into everybody else's mold I mean, I'm 54 years old. So at the time I was 50 and there's something about that is very freeing. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
haven't turned 50 yet, it's a wake up call and
Oh,
in a
wow.
good way. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a certain freedom that comes with it and just all these things came together.
Mhm.
30 some odd years of at that Rader Institute when I was 12-week inpatient program, it was the first time people said to me, "Why do you think the way you do? Why do
Mhm.
you believe what you believe?"
Mhm.
And that's what set me on my personal growth journey. And
Mhm.
it took me that long to say, enough.
Mhm.
It's time. I
Yeah.
need to do this. And I had already kind of started putting together some things, but I wasn't really 100% sure. But it was just like, okay, the world is very different. My dad's
Mhm.
going to move out of this house. It's like the whole family dynamic is different.
Yeah.
It's time. I got to do this. And so that was it just, and there's also the grief process,
Right.
right? When you go through a grief process, if you haven't, there's a part of it that's very reflective.
Mhm.
And I don't mean like the 4 stages of grief. I mean, when you start dealing with the idea that, I'm the oldest. So I am now the oldest woman in my family. And there's a realization that
Yeah.
you could be next. So you start
Oh, wow.
reflecting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But all of that was what kind of just said, I got to do this. I got to figure this out. I have
Mhm.
something more to do than what I'm doing. Right.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Wow. So I apologize for the passing of your mom, but I
Thank you.
hear that, the message that she left behind was so powerful that I appreciate that you guys had that knee to knee conversation and that moment where it was your aha moment, and
Hmm.
sometimes it takes us internally to hear that, to tell ourselves that, and sometimes it takes another person externally to say that, whether it's a
Right.
close family member or not. So and I think a lot of people out there are struggling for that message and they're waiting for that message to happen. And for those who are kind of stuck in their own rut and their own world at that time, like what suggestions do you have for them to continue to move forward? Should they continue waiting for that message? Should they, what is best for them to move forward from
There's no way I can, I can't answer that question.
that?
Several things I would say, because I'm a coach and I work with other women, and my message is to get up and move,
Yeah, there you go.
but at the same time, there have been instances, even in the last 6 months, where another coach or a friend has looked at me and said, "Do you just need permission for this? I
Mm,
give you permission
mm,
granted," right?
yeah, yeah,
And so maybe you need somebody that can, if you're not ready to do that for yourself,
right.
somebody that can say to you, "Hey,
Yeah.
the only person that needs permission to do this is you, and you've got it."
Hmm.
Because when we start looking and we're willing to be open to what's available,
Hmm.
it will start happening.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd be the last person to say that this is an easy road.
Right.
It's
Hmm.
just not.
Yeah.
It took me 30 some odd years to get here. And I'm not saying it needs to be that for everybody,
Right. Yeah.
but we all have our own hero's journey, that cycle of making it through, and we all have the lessons we have to learn. Some of us learn them really slow. And I'm really envious of young women who learn these things early on, or who are blessed to have
Right.
parents who teach them to them, or older women like me in their lives that can teach them. But I would say get around people, because Jim Rohn says you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Mm.
And in my Facebook community, we just finished studying Atomic Habits. And one of the things he talked about was we imitate the people that we're around. We
Yeah.
imitate the many, we imitate the powerful. So get around people who you want to be like. Get around people who are doing the things you want to do, even if you don't do them yet.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I love that. I love that. Average of the 5 people you're around. That's making
That's
me really
Jim Rohn. Yeah.
my circle.
And we all have an inner circle, and it influences us whether you want it to or not. And so there have been times when I've had to say, huh, I don't want to think that anymore.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've done for myself
Mhm.
is I have created this Facebook community, because we all are focused on personal growth. So
Yes.
inside that community, we
Yes.
say, these are the principles we live by. So
Mhm.
whatever happens outside, that's the world, right? It's
Mhm.
like, and you have to learn too to create some internal boundaries, because I
Yeah.
can't stop what's happening
Right.
out here.
Exactly. You
I
can't
wish I
change things
could,
around you, but right. Focus
but
on you. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
And I have to say that after our meet and greet, you did invite me to the Facebook group, and I have found it incredibly refreshing to just see your energy in there and the topics that you're discussing. So
Thank
anybody
you.
who's interested, definitely reach out to Andrea, because I think it's a great it's a breath of fresh air. It really is. There's so many just gloom and doom on the headlines, and you see people wanting to, be politicians all of a sudden, or
Right.
suddenly, somehow, some way they earn their medical degree overnight, and everybody has an opinion about something. And I think yours is just like a, it's a great space to just sit and just watch and hear things that are going on in there. So
Well,
I
thank
love it.
you. I mean, it's not a big group. We're almost up to 300, like we're 290 something.
Yeah.
But when I look at the analytics, like 250 people are active. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, wow. So, what we need to remember too, though, is that just because it's happy and a breath of fresh air, we do talk about real things, because
Yeah.
we're all about personal growth.
Exactly.
And no matter what happens in politics, or who gets their medical degree or who doesn't, or who thinks they have a medical degree,
Yeah.
we're about ourselves.
Yep.
We're intentional optimism is something that is an active pursuit. It is not something that someone puts on you. It is not something that you can just get by osmosis. That's how it starts, because you're around those people. But the goal is to actually take control of
Mhm.
my future and my attitude and my thoughts, because that's all I have
Yeah.
control over,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. So on that note, something that you'd mentioned as well is just being a role model for future generations. So,
Mm.
I mean, I think we all understand what that means, but let's hear what it means from Andrea's perspective.
Well, somebody's always watching you.
Yeah.
If you are, if you're online, somebody's always watching you.
Mhm.
And if you are a parent,
Yeah.
if you are a boss, even if you're just a coworker,
Yeah.
somebody's always watching you.
Mhm.
And
Oh no, I think I lost her permanently. Andrea, are you there? You're back.
Back. I am so sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries. We can just continue where we left off whenever you're ready. It was everybody's always watching you.
Okay. So everybody is always watching you, especially this has become very clear to me as the mother of a 12-year-old. And that's part of my story as well. What you didn't share is that, or maybe you didn't know, is that part of being obese and part of that what included infertility for me. So we went through that, and I said, that's not something I want to deal with, and I don't want the idea or the option of a 13% chance of live birth. Adoption's 100%. So our son is adopted. And so I'm an older mother, and we have a sixth grader in the house. But all that to say, he's a digital recorder, and it doesn't matter if you think he's not listening. If you think he's playing a video game, he knows exactly what's going on. And I work at a major university here in town, and I oversee all of the operations for the administrative staff for a university Department of Medicine group. And so it's just, there are people who are always watching. But what's important is the legacy we leave behind. What is one of the things that I actually put out on my face. I usually don't do political stuff at all, but one inaugural address quote stuck with me immediately. It was, let's lead not by our power, but by the power of our example. And and I was like, oh, I'm writing that down. And it was because I feel like that's straight out of my book. And it's one thing to say something, but when your words don't match your actions, which we could say that probably about every politician. So let's not discuss them. But when our words don't match our actions, people don't believe us. Right. So if we're going to live authentically, which is one of my top values, my words need to match my actions. It means saying sorry when I was wrong, even when it's my son, even when it's one of my employees. It means saying, I don't know when I don't. All of that is being a role model. And if that's something that you don't want to do, then you shouldn't be a parent. You shouldn't be a boss. Just be very careful. Because I think it was Michael Jordan that said, I never really wanted to be a role model. I'm like, dude, you have a choice. It's hard, but it's part of adulting.
No, and like all of this, like that's totally like me. Like that's how I think, that's how I feel. You always want to set an example. You always want to be who you are because everybody's watching you. I mean, when you said digital recorder, like that's the best way like I could have ever explained that as well. Like that's just that's what they are. They're like sponges. They're just soaking up everything you're saying and doing. And at one point in time, when you're a parent, you realize your kid will regurgitate that exactly the way you said it right back at you.
At the worst time in the world. My husband's a pastor, so wait a minute, what did the pastor's kids say in the church? Right. But I think it's just really important to realize that if you influence anybody, influence them well. Now, I want to put a caveat in there. It doesn't mean we always have to be perfect. It doesn't mean we need to be right. It means we need to be real. It means we need to admit when we're wrong and make sure that because I just had a conversation today with somebody. We were talking about we don't have to have all the answers. It's actually more authentic to say, I don't know, let's go find out. Right?
100%. Like I do that all the time as a leader when my staff asks me, Jasmine, how do I do this? Or what do I need to do here? And I was like, you know what? Hold on a second. I don't have the answer to that, or I'm not quite sure, but let me find out somebody who does, and then I do the research, I do the legwork, and then I come back to them
and present them with what they needed to know and what they needed to hear,
Yeah.
and so we are always seeking. I think a lot of people, there are some out there who think that they should be a know-it-all and they should have all the answers, and people see right through that. Like people know when you're lying and you're bluffing, and
Well, and
just
we also have a culture, I think, that holds that up as the answer. We have a culture, especially now that everything is online too. We have this online culture that says, "I have the answers. Come see me," And well, yeah, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I mean, you have an opinion, and but in corporate culture, especially,
Mhm.
you get in trouble for not knowing, right? It's like, why don't you know the answer? I don't.
Yeah,
And I'm in University Medical Center. I don't have the answers, for crying out loud.
yeah.
So, but a lot of it is just knowing where and being willing to just be wrong and just
Mhm.
be willing to just say, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It's,
So,
it's okay to say, I don't know. Being vulnerable is a good thing too, and people need to understand that that it's okay to
right,
be vulnerable. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's
right.
okay to move on. And just like you were saying, online culture, that there's a even when we look at our social media and the way things are, right? So when Instagram came out, it became like the models platform.
Right.
Everybody was a model on there. Everybody looked perfect in picture. It was just a picture captured in time at the right moment, at the right angle.
Hmm.
Now you have TikTok. People who were thriving on Instagram can't do the same on TikTok because now TikTok requires you to actually be you and 15 to 60 seconds of you. And so if you can't achieve that, and then you're not going to thrive over there. So it's kind of interesting how we're seeing this culture shift. And then I'm not sure, Andrea, if you're on Clubhouse, but now with Clubhouse, it's like totally a podcaster's platform. Like it's just talk radio all day long.
I know. I get them all on my Apple Watch. I am on there, but I am not super active yet. But I wanted to make sure that I got in with my name, Andrea Optimist,
Yeah,
and I've been invited to help co-host some rooms. I just
yeah,
haven't done it yet.
yeah.
So, and
Careful.
every time I go to listen to something, it's like, oh my gosh, this is too much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm excited about getting on Clubhouse because evidently it is really good for us podcasters.
It is such a great platform. And I mean, if you enjoy listening to podcasts, I think you will enjoy listening to Clubhouse. And now it takes a little bit of digging around to find the right algorithm, because the first night I was on there, it was just like relationships. I'm like, okay, let's click on that. And
Yeah.
then you don't even want to know what like the first two sentences I heard was. I'm like, all right, wrong. And then here I am thinking, oh my gosh, I've just set the algorithm to set me up for more rooms like that.
Oh no.
So that
Yeah.
was interesting. But once you get the algorithm down, and you're following the right people and the right influencers that you want to,
Mm.
that are your role models, and then it's just crazy. And then these billionaires and millionaires on there they're like genies on there, just handing out prizes left and right. It's insane.
Really? I've missed that. I haven't done that yet.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, lots of very influential people with a lot of money who are just like, all right, get on here and tell me what you want. And then,
I'm gonna have to go find you and follow you around so I can see who these millionaires are because I could use a little.
there's, there's like Shark Tank pitches on there. There's all kinds of crazy things.
I've seen that come across. And I
Yeah,
just was like, what does that mean?
but it's
Cool.
insane and it's pretty crazy, and it's
Yeah.
pretty awesome where like our culture is shifting, and I'm liking where that's going. So,
Yeah. Cool.
all right. So let's talk a little bit about intentional optimism. You've
Okay.
mentioned it, and let's just tell the people what it is and how you came up with it and what your concept is behind it.
So, intentional optimism is my own personal growth and life philosophy. So, everybody has, from any of your influencers or personal growth gurus, have their own kind of like set of
Yeah.
principles.
Yeah.
And mine are based, like I said, I'm Christian. My mom, I mean, my parents were missionaries. My husband's a pastor.
Mm.
My dad gave my mother, when she retired, a beautiful hand calligraphied Proverbs 31 verses 3 through 10, which
Uh-huh.
if you're not familiar with that, it's not King Solomon, King Lemuel, because Solomon wrote most of the Proverbs, but this is King Lemuel's mom said, hey dude, time to get married. Let's find you an amazing woman.
Uh-huh.
And so this was a picture of who she could be throughout her entire lifetime. And I had always been kind of, I don't know if I was really taught this, but in my mind, she was this homemaker and she canned her food and she made her own clothes and she had 10 children. And I just was like, it's not me. And in the community that I was raised in, that was kind of the way we looked at it. So it came from somewhere. But when my dad gave that to my mother, and then when my mother died, I took another look at that picture, and it's gorgeous. It's in Hebrew, actually. And it was done by a rabbi in Jerusalem. And I thought, maybe I should take a better look at that. Because I'm in the scriptures a lot. I'm a very spiritual person. So I'm constantly working on my spiritual growth, because that's part of my personal growth. And I thought I need to take a better look at that. And when I did, I thought, oh, wait a minute, this lady is not who I thought she was. She is a real estate magnate. She is a shipping magnate. She buys a field, grows a vineyard, sells the wine, takes her profits and does something else with it. She's a philanthropist. Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, go into the contemporary English version. Like if you go to BibleGateway.com and you go to the contemporary English version, when you read it, it's in very clear, like understandable modern language.
Yeah.
And she clothes all of her people in purple. And at the time, purple cloth was, you couldn't get it. It was just for royalty. And her children think she's amazing. And I mean, just all these things. She makes clothes. Her husband's well-known because of her. I mean, it's just all these wonderful things. And I thought, this is not who I thought she was. And all my life I've been told I was too loud. I mean, I actually had some deacons sit me down and tell me they were going to ask for my husband to be fired because of me. Yeah, I'm little on me. Can you imagine? So I'm not your typical pastor's wife. I'm not the demure Southern lady. I do have opinions, but I had stuffed them for so long. And I thought, this is my opportunity to really say, all right, all these years of personal growth, looking at this, who am I really? And what I realized there were 6 main areas that I have to work on in order to be an intentional optimist. Because when my mother died, I thought, oh, the sunshine is gone. She was like champagne, right? She would come in the room and just like, and I thought the sunshine is gone. And we use the word sanguine growing up. And a lot of people don't know what that means. My best friend said, don't use that in your business. Nobody knows what it is. So I decided to go with intentional optimism. And so I said, I want to pursue this because this is who I know I really am. And I want to carry on that legacy. So there are 6 main tenets. And underneath them, there's all kinds of nuances. But the main ones are, of course, optimistic. And that doesn't mean sunny optimism. It does. I mean, yes, it's positive and it's optimism. There's sun. You can see sunshine behind me. But it doesn't mean I don't understand the world. It's understanding it through the eyes of what we see. And so it's, you're positive about things, but positive also means you understand, right? I am positive about this, not just it's half full. So optimistic, present, which evidently this is the one that really gets people. When I went to explain these on my podcast, it is the most downloaded episode. It's just like the importance of being present. It's like, oh, wow, that one. Yep. People are reading that or listening to that one. And, that includes the idea that we as grown-ups, and the more we know, actually have the ability to celebrate wonder and beauty better than a child, because a child doesn't understand that the seed goes into the ground and dies and does all this stuff before it comes up and becomes a beautiful flower. And so being present means that we understand all those things, and it gives us the opportunity to be generous and open. So we're optimistic, we're present, we're energetic. She is industrious, right? This woman, she, like I said, buys a field, plants a vineyard, sells the wine, takes the profits and does it again. But it's not just that. She's also joyful. I get cold chills when I quote this one every time. She laughs at the days to come. Right? It says she laughs, verse 25, she laughs at the days to come. She is not afraid of the future. So all of that is joy and excitement and energy, and she shares that with others. She's also courageous, which means she's a leader. She has a staff. She, like I said, she does all these things, but she's adventurous. She's willing to handle what happens when your ships go out and may not come back. She's willing to do all of those things, but she's resilient because she's not really afraid, because she's planned for what's going to happen. So that's all part of being courageous. So you have optimistic, present, energetic, courageous. She's super wise. Right. People come to her. I don't know if you remember, I'm really dating myself when I say E.F. Hutton. E.F. Hutton was the broker name that if you dropped that back in the 70s, everybody in the restaurant stopped talking. Right. So she had good things to say. She she taught her household and her children how to be respectful. All this wisdom was embodied in her. But then it's all kind of wrapped up and bookended by intentional. She planned. She had purpose. She, you don't just walk into the woods hoping that you're going to come out on the other side. You take a map, right? Yeah. And that was really what is embodied in her. So it's those 6 things that make up intentional optimism. And I'm actually working on a whole new analogy of a sailboat, where you get into the boat and all these different things are like your rudder and your sail and your rigging and all. So that's coming out pretty soon. But it is a active pursuit. It's not. And I think that's part of what the sailboat does too. You don't just stand on the island A and look to get to island B. You have to actually do something to get there. And that's what intentional optimism is. It helps you get where you want to go.
Wow. I love the examples. I think each broken down section of that brings it all together. But I love the example that you're giving at the very end, like going into the woods, but not and hoping to get onto the other side and having a map, and then looking from island A to island B. But how do you get there? You have to do something. You have to act to get there. And I love that. That was beautifully said and beautifully put so that people understand that. So yes, I like it. I like it a lot.
Me too. I will tell you though, it's not easy to live, right? I mean, we talk about being example. No more pressure has ever been put on me than it is now. When I start telling people about this, when I go on YouTube and I say, this is what I think and this is what I believe, you better believe people are watching me. Right. But I have to say, again, I'm authentic. I struggle in this area. One of the things that she is, I think it's part of wisdom, is she's financially savvy. I am not, right? I am still learning how to get out of debt. I am still, all of these things are areas for me to learn. This is a journey that I'm on. And one of the things I say in my group and on my podcast is, hey, let's go on this journey together, right? Come along. Let's link arms and go together, because that's how we're going to get there.
Yeah. No, I love it. I am going to use that till there's no tomorrow.
Well, the map thing, I have to give props to Brendan Burchard.
Okay.
He said his dad always said the best time to have the map is before you head into the woods. So if you want to quote him, I mean, you can quote me in one way, but truthfully, I have to tell you that actually comes from him. He says that a lot.
Okay. I love it. I will definitely have it written down. I'll know where it's coming from, and I'll make sure to give credit where credit is due. But I feel like even being a parent and my kids coming to me with a problem, and I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to solve this problem? Don't just come with a problem. Come with a problem and a suggestion for a solution, and we figure out whether or not we can make that solution happen and what it takes to get there. And then when my staff comes to me with a problem, there's a patient care concern or a quality concern. What can we do? This is what's reality right now. And what we envision is what could happen over there on island B. Now, how do we get there from island A to island B? Right. And so don't just come with the problem, come with a solution or a suggestion so that we can start brainstorming what we need to do to act on this. And I love it. Yes. I love it.
Yay.
That's
my favorite. If you look on my social media, you'll see the whole, yay. I love doing that. Just because I think we need to celebrate the little things. We need to celebrate what we learn. We need to celebrate what we accomplish. Each day I write down, again, at the end of the week, what are my wins? And sometimes I have to go back and say, oh, I had no idea I had these wins. I knew I had a really hard, long week, but I did this, and this. So being able to not only say, come with these things and come with the solutions, celebrate the solution.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Celebration is key. Celebration and gratitude. I feel like I speak to a lot of different people who all have a term and a phrase for what it is that they want to express. And in your case, it's celebration. And I think in the last interview that I had was gratitude, expressing the gratitude for the one thing that you have that day to get you to the next, and just a way for us to all find the glue that holds us together to get us to the next day, to keep us motivated. All right. Well, so Andrea, you mentioned the whole being a woman and being demure, a Southern woman, demure and everything. And what resonates with me is that growing up Asian American, that was the expectation, right? So you're an Asian female. You should be submissive.
Korea, I totally get it.
So you understand. But it was just the expectation was you're too loud, calm down. You're too excited. You have too much energy. You have too much hopes and dreams. you
No,
know?
you don't. You are all that and more, and
Yes,
it's
yes,
great. I mean,
yes.
one of if you open my phone or anything, one of my favorite verses is from the Apostle Paul, who wrote letters to like all the churches everywhere, and he said, "We are his workmanship, created to do good things."
Yeah,
And it's like, I'm created specifically as me,
yeah.
with all my quirks, with all of my
Mhm.
loud personality,
Yeah,
with my extroversion versus my introversion.
yeah.
And you are created just like you were supposed to be created.
Mhm.
And you are put here to do beautiful things
Yeah.
and be loud, but be
Mhm.
respectful, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to be disrespectful in your loudness.
Right.
I
Exactly.
mean, there's always limits that we can put on ourselves
Mhm.
to frame that example that we want to leave.
Mhm.
But please, ladies, don't leave the example that you can't be you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the
Exactly.
one thing I would say. Just don't leave the example that you're not enough.
Right.
Don't leave the example that you have to be something you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Yeah, and I think that's so incredibly important is I think a lot of times society or people around you, what have you, want to put you into like this perfect little box, right? And like just stay here, just stay
Mhm.
compressed in this tiny little box. That's where you belong and that's where you should remain. And women, and especially women in leadership, I think comes with a totally different like left field perspective that some people in this world still are not ready for in 2021.
Mhm.
So why don't we discuss that, Andrea? So,
Okay.
Andrea, so women in leadership and just how that all kind of comes together.
So, we're in a special place and a special point of time in the United States for women in leadership.
Mhm.
And no matter what your politics are,
Yeah.
I that's of no consequence to me.
Mhm.
I celebrate, no matter what my politics are, I celebrate the fact that we have a woman in
Yes.
the second highest office in the land. And for me, that means that it's possible that I could coach somebody else into something like that,
Mhm.
or my niece could do that, or my somebody else could do that. Any young woman listening can be that. But
Mhm.
what I want to say to women is, we are uniquely poised
Mhm.
in this, especially coming out of this pandemic. I think we are uniquely positioned. We have unique makeup. Like it or not, women are more nurturing than men. And as we come out of this pandemic with the digital world, with asynchronous learning, with all of these different things, I think women have the opportunity to offer something new.
Mhm.
We have the opportunity to say the future can look different than the present,
Mhm.
because I don't know that there's anybody in the United States right now that thinks that our leadership model is great,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
We've said it's broken for a long time, but no matter what your politics are, or who you like, I think it's just really easy to say the institutions might need
Mhm.
some fixing.
Yeah.
Women
Yeah.
are, I think, the ideal people to do that. Even if we don't go that high, we can still affect change where we are. I talk to women every day who don't realize they're leaders, who
Yeah.
don't who say, I never even thought of myself as a leader. One of the questions I ask on my podcast is, when did you realize you were a leader? And a lot of them will say, I never really thought of myself as a leader. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, great. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because when we step up into what we're supposed to do, when we forget about being the model of leadership. Now, I'm not saying leadership principle. I'm a John Maxwell coach, right? So
Mhm.
I think that there are some amazing leadership principles out there,
Yeah.
leadership guidelines, and I'm going to always promote that. As a matter of fact, John Maxwell's leadership stuff is great.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got
But
his book. I'm waiting to read it. It's my
which
next one.
one?
It's Burgundy. That's all I remember. I'm very visual.
They're all good. So I want to make sure that we don't say that the leadership principles that are out there are bad, but the idea that you have to look a certain way, act a certain way, to be a leader in corporate, in medical, in university, you don't, ladies, need to act like a man. You don't, ladies, need to act like a siren.
Oh.
You need to be you. And if they
Mhm.
can't celebrate you for who you are, you need to find some place to be you. Now, I know that's easy for me to say in a vacuum. We all need jobs. We all need a paycheck. We all want to excel. There's certain things that we're going to say, I understand. I'm going to deal with that for a while, but I'm going to try and stay here and make a difference. I've been in university medical setting for 21 years, and there's things that I know that will never change.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. But I think that as women, we have the ability to lead in ways that we've not recognized. So when I say unconventional leaders, I mean outside the norm. Lead, maybe you have a job and you do your thing, but then you also help in a nonprofit or PTA president, for crying out. I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds traditional, but
Yeah.
the lady that's been doing PTA for my county and has been helping out, I mean, she's amazing. And the parents would have literally, I would have had a meltdown if she wasn't the one there giving the information. She stepped up
Right.
into a leadership role that she didn't know she was going to have. She's
Uh-huh.
an author. She's not, it's not something that she planned on doing. And her husband was deployed. And, so I think that if we are willing to just see things a little bit different, it's that whole idea of when you look at things differently, the things you look at change. And when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And if we just look at leadership differently, if we just say, oh, I'm a leader, I can be a leader. It starts with leading myself. And this you're going to get from John Maxwell. You start with leading yourself, and then other people will follow. And that's how you're a role model.
Right. And I think a lot of times, and this goes back to that conversation in leadership when it's like, what's the difference between a manager versus a leader, right? And so it goes back to manager is like, what's the best way to put it? Managers manage. They do things, they do tasks, they do task work, but leaders inspire. They are role models. They do things that people want to follow in what they're doing. They end up having people who are, are aligned with what their vision is, to align with their vision. And so they're leading by example. They're leading through their actions. And, managers, not necessarily, you can be a manager and hold a management position and not be a leader.
I'm a manager. There's aspects to it that are how you act as a person, what you do, but in how you interact with people, it's not just the inspirational piece. Managers tend to contain things, whereas leaders expand things. There's another one for you. And for me, I'm really more of a coach than a manager. And there are times that gets me in trouble as a manager. But here's the example I like. I don't like to take my dog out for a run because I have to drag her. She's a beagle and she would really prefer to be like nose to the ground. So I'm dragging it becomes like one of those rope pull things. I prefer to be dragged down the street by a dog. And to me, that's the difference between also a manager and a leader. A manager many times has to drag them down the road, whereas the leader is like inspiring, and then the dog takes off. They're like, oh, yay. And they go, right? So that's my personal analogy that I like to use.
No, and I love that. And I love it when people come and they have ideas and they're excited and there's just so much enthusiasm behind what it is they're about to present or say, or just the ideas that they have and the vision that they have for where it could go and how it can improve current processes. And I love that. I love that and that's, and I love, like, so as a nurse manager, I love to hire new nurses who just come in and they're just invigorating and they have so much just
that's fresh.
Yes. And they're not numb from the profession. They're not hardened by it anymore, yet.
Yeah.
And I hope that they stay
it's
that way.
It's a hard profession. Yeah.
It is. And so just making sure that they stay that way and empowering them to continue to grow in that type of way through knowledge and evolution, and just as a nurse and as a leader themselves. Just love seeing that.
Bravo. Do that. Yeah. I started out as a nursing major and realized early on that that's not what I needed to do. It's like, so I love all you nurses, not for me.
But you would be wonderful no matter what you did and which direction you went in. I think you're just a phenomenal person in general, and your energy is just so contagious. And it's beyond the smile now. It's now just the energy and the presence and what it is that you have to share with the world. So Andrea, if I gave you a billboard, what would it say?
Wow. I didn't think I would be one of these people that went, huh? What would it say? Be you.
Be you.
Yeah, be you. And
Yeah.
y- uh, I don't know how to say it better because that's for
Yeah.
me,
Mhm.
that's my thing. It's be
Yeah.
me. And if the
Exactly.
billboard would be, like I said, you lead yourself first. So
Yeah.
for me, the billboard would be Andrea, be you.
Mhm.
And I think that's the reminder. I still have to do that every day. I
Mhm.
still have to say, this is who I am.
Mhm.
That is who you are. I
Mhm.
don't do that. And
Yeah.
that, so I think it's really important that we celebrate the
Uh-huh.
beauty of each and every person
Yes.
and make sure that they understand that it's not only okay to be themselves, but it's
Mhm.
good to be themselves. It's
Mhm.
really good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's and something that the simplicity behind it really is what's so important, right? Is because sometimes it's really that simple, and just being authentic to yourself, being who you are, and presenting yourself as yourself, and and not as what everybody else thinks you should be is where it needs to start before
Mm.
for you to make those huge moves going forward. Um, so Andrea, sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you yet?
Well, we didn't talk at all about weight management.
Okay.
And I do want to say that um, eating disorders are real
Mhm.
and eating disorders are debilitating. But there's hope and there's help. And I did actually go through a 12-week program that was I turned 21 in the hospital,
Okay.
and it was the beginning of my personal growth journey.
Mhm.
And if I, at the time, didn't fully understand that my binging was considered an easy eating disorder, I
Mhm.
just, I was just fat, right? I mean, it was just like everybody said, you're fat. And so knowing that there is the ability to develop tools that we can put in our tool belt to help us deal with whatever we're going through, whatever we've been through,
Mhm.
and that's all part of personal growth,
Mhm.
you are worth it.
Yeah.
And do not, as somebody who was 310 pounds and had gastric bypass surgery, March
Mhm.
31st will be 16 years.
Wow.
And I'm not quite to my goal weight, but I'm right around the 120. So, I don't mind telling people that because I want them to know it's possible to do that and be successful. But
Mhm.
it's not a pill and it's
Mhm.
not a magic bullet.
Mhm.
It's literally it's another tool. But
Mhm.
please don't think that it's too late for you to be
Mhm.
healthy. Please don't think that because you're worth it, right? It's
Yeah.
like not
Yeah.
only are you enough, but you're worth it.
Yeah.
And it's your health in this pandemic. We've seen that obesity is an indicator of the possibility of even worse COVID symptoms and more morbidity.
Yeah.
So please take care of yourself. And that's something I'm happy to talk to people about. Reach out to me. I'm available. I
Yeah.
don't mind having clearly, I don't mind talking.
Awesome. Well, you know what? I think that was the important message, right? Is that it's not a magic bullet and that it wasn't just the surgery that
Right.
facilitated the weight loss. It was a lot. There was a lot more comprehensive
Mhm.
everything from A to Z that you had to do, that you had to focus on in order to better yourself.
Right.
And to go from 310 to 120, that's amazing.
Well,
Oh my
and counseling is important because there's a
God.
reason why.
Mhm.
But I also and this thing here gets used every day. I'm a Noom person, and I still write down. I still weigh. I still write down my food because
Okay.
I want to stay healthy.
Yeah.
And I know that there are certain things about. I tried doing intermittent fasting, but I realized, oh, that's with my history of bulimia, it doesn't work. And
Mhm.
so for me, Noom is really helpful, and or just having some kind of accountability and
Mhm.
making sure that I make good choices for
Yeah.
myself because you got to do it.
Yeah.
You got to be good to yourself in all
Yeah.
the ways.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, great, great advice, great feedback, great. Just thank you so much for sharing your story. That was pretty incredible. So thank
Well,
you.
thank you for having me.
So, Andrea, where can people find you? Where can our guests find you?
We've talked about intentional optimism. I do have a website and I do have a Facebook page, but I also have a Facebook group. It's only
Mhm.
for women, and it's called Intentional Optimists. Dr. Jazz is a member.
lost you again. 56. And you're back.
Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. We'll just it cut off right as soon as you were talking about the Facebook group. So we'll just
Okay.
start from the beginning of all the different.
Okay, start with my website or.
Yeah. So
okay.
I'll lead in with the question, and then you can just go ahead. All right. All right. So Andrea, where else can everybody find you? Where can Comfort Kills guests find you?
Well, we did mention my website, which is intentionaloptimist.com. And on there, you can look at ideas for or possibilities for one-on-one coaching. And I am putting together a beta program for some asynchronous coaching.
Yeah.
I'm using the platform of Marco Polo. So because I find that really I'm very drawn to high-performing, busy, mission-minded women. And so we don't always have time to sit down for a Zoom call, you know? So I'm kind of testing this out to see where it goes. You can also find me on Facebook. And as Dr. Jazz said earlier, I have a Facebook group called The Intentional Optimists, and a few questions to answer when you get in there, but we would love to have you. We are doing book clubs, and we're making that a little bit more robust. I think it'll be really amazing to see where we can go in the next few years. But I also have a podcast called Intentional Optimists, Unconventional Leaders. So there are women interviewed on there who, they're not famous women. They're women who are making a difference right where they are in their own unique ways. And I teach every other one. So it's like you'll get my intentional optimism teaching on every other podcast.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. I'll definitely have to subscribe and listen because I think you would be a great morning drive, invigorating speaker that I can listen to, and can't wait, can't wait. So thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you on the show, and love seeing that the things that you're doing and how you're inspiring women to just be themselves.
Yep. Thank you very much. This was delightful.
Thank you. All right.